side, and the president was holding his left chest up on his arm.
But he was not carried in. He was not on a stretcher.
No, he wasn't on a stretcher.
Lynn Nofziger, an official in the Reagan White House, confirmed a short time later that the president had indeed been shot.
The president was shot once in the left chest. The bullet entered from the left side. He is conscious. He is in stable condition.
The president was taken into surgery shortly before 4 o'clock Eastern Time for removal of the bullet that had lodged on his left side and for repair of the damage. A reporter from Mutual Radio, Ross Simpson, was in the hospital and talking to some of the doctors present and had this report about what they had to say about Mr. Reagan's going into surgery.
Were it just a cyst that had to be removed in open chest surgery, it would be serious enough. The fact that he has a bullet wound and a traumatic wound and causing the lung to collapse, this complicates the problem. It's not insurmountable, but it is serious.
The president has been in surgery, and we are told by various sources that he was doing well. In fact, we are waiting for a briefing that is to get underway any moment here in the press room at George Washington University Hospital. Presumably the surgery is over. A briefing said to be going to be conducted by two of the surgeons themselves and by Lynn Nofziger. Tell me what they're saying over there. Come on over here and tell me that, Peter. We have two men in white smocks over here talking to a group of reporters, and I guess we ought to find out what they're saying. This may be a private briefing. Are those the surgeons? Are those the surgeons? The briefing hasn't started? Come on over here and tell me what they just told you. Peter McHale is one of our producers.
I said there was one bullet. It did puncture the lung. It was removed, and they are not...
Bring him over here, Peter. Get him right on over here. We're expecting, as I say, this briefing by Nofziger and two of the surgeons. Just go right on in there and bring him right over here. And that will be, I guess, the first official word we've had on how the president's surgery has gone. His wife, Nancy Reagan, of course, was with him. As we've heard earlier, when he walked in under his own power, subsequently he began to joke with the doctors, and he joked with his wife. He was conscious. He was always talking and joking. There's a great clamor here because, as you can imagine, if these two surgeons are giving private briefings to a few reporters, the rest of us want to find out. Get on over here. What they're saying. What's happening here? Well, it's kind of bedlam. I suppose that these things happen at times like this. And until we can sort it out... Oh, yes, Barry Seraphin. Barry, what did you just learn, I hope?
Not a lot. We're told the surgery was performed by Dr. Benjamin Aaron, the chief thoracic surgeon here at the hospital. We're told that the bullet was not in fragments, that it was intact and was removed, and it did indeed puncture Mr. Reagan's lung.
Is the surgery over?
And apparently it is over.
Now, did they tell you anything about how he's doing?
Again, all indications are that he came through it well.
But we can then presume that it's over. The bullet did not fragment. It was a .22 caliber bullet, we assume.
We assume. That's what we've been hearing all day. I did not hear that just now, but we do know that they didn't have to pick pieces out. They removed an intact bullet which had punctured the president's lung.
Did they say anything about whether the lung had been collapsed or whether one of the ribs had been broken? Those were some of the reports that from time to time we were picking up.
No word on that.
Well, thank you very much, Barry Seraphin. These two, we presume doctors. Did they identify themselves as doctors?
They are doctors, yes.
And did they say they'd taken part in the surgery?
This was Dr. Craig Harmon. And they did not say whether they took part, although it sounds like they did. They did say that the surgery was led by Dr. Benjamin Aaron.
Who presumably will be one of those who will brief us shortly here in the briefing room. Well, just to recapitulate about what we think we know now, we think the surgery is over from the reports of these two doctors who have entered the briefing room, but who are not going to actually brief us, apparently. One bullet was removed from the president's body. It had not fragmented. From all reports, the president appears to be doing well, although we do not have an official report on the outcome of the surgery from doctors up here at the podium. So I think until we do start the briefing, I'd better say back to you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Sam. Thank you very much indeed. Well, that's the news, basically. We're just going to have to wait until we get word that the briefing actually has started there at the George Washington University Hospital. It's now 7:25. It was, what, 2:30?
About 5 hours ago.
About 5 hours ago that it all actually happened. While we're waiting for the briefing there at the George Washington University Hospital to get underway, we're going to go back overseas to my colleague Peter Jennings, who is at our desk in London. Peter has been following this naturally and keeping track of the foreign reaction. Peter?
Well, Frank, the assassination attempts shock leaders overseas and evoke painful memories of other such occasions. West Germany's Chancellor Schmidt learned the news with deep horror. Just a few hours earlier, he telephoned President Reagan, and they discussed the situation in Poland. In Egypt, President Sadat condemned what he called this criminal action which has jolted the entire world. Israel's Prime Minister Begin reacted with shock and astonishment. King Juan Carlos of Spain, a nation not strange to political violence, said the attempt to kill the president disgracefully proves that terrorist violence today is generalized. It aroused horror and indignation in Italy's President Sandro Pertini. The Soviet news agency TASS reported the attempt without comment in just 8 lines, 75 minutes after it happened, and Moscow radio ignored it. Here in Britain, Queen Elizabeth said she was very shocked, and with me here in our London newsroom is Bernard Ingham, who is the press secretary to Prime Minister Thatcher. Mr. Ingham, just how did the Prime Minister learn about this?
Well, I was at a dinner party with the Fleet Street editor, in fact, and he received a telephone call during the dinner to receive the news, and immediately I got on the telephone to number 10 Downing Street, where the Prime Minister was working, and informed her.
What was her reaction?
She was shocked, deeply distressed, and she immediately got off a message to Washington expressing her concern, hoping that the President was not seriously injured, and of course expressing deep sympathy to Mrs. Nancy Reagan, and also to the others injured and their families.
And I know you were particularly concerned because Jim, aside from the President's concern naturally, but for Jim Brady, who had recently been a very helpful host to you in Washington.
Yes, I met him for the first time when the Prime Minister was over there in February. I must say that he was very, very helpful to me. He made me most welcome, both in the White House and wherever we worked together. I think I could have worked, I could work with him very easily, and we did. I sat next to him at dinner. He actually fed me jelly beans, too. I shall never forget that. He was the most, I think, generous host and a very easy man to work with, and I do hope he's okay.
Tell me, what does the British government do at a time like this? Do you go on a state of alert when the President of the United States becomes indisposed like this?
Well, of course, we are extremely deeply concerned about it, but the United States is very capable of looking after itself, and we're confident about our ally. But of course, we have deep sympathy for the United States.
Do you think it alters things all of a sudden overnight in the Western Alliance?
No.
I mean, do you take any special precautions? Are you concerned that other people will take advantage?
No, I don't think so. No. I think the strength of the alliance is the strength of the alliance.
And what about security for the Prime Minister himself? Does it always just automatically increase at a time like this?
I think the security with the Prime Minister is always very strong and very tight. I don't think it's particularly increased on occasions of this kind. I think that we're always vigilant.
Thank you very much, Bernard Ingham.
Peter, we're going to have to go.
Prime Minister Thatcher. Now back to you, Frank and Weiss.
Yes. Thank you, Peter. Sorry that we had to interrupt so quickly, but the briefing is underway now, we understand, at the hospital, or at least is about to begin, so let's go back to George Washington University Hospital. Here's Lynn Nofziger.
The President is out of surgery and is in good condition, and I have brought with me here this evening Dr. Dennis O'Leary, who is the Dean for Clinical Affairs at George Washington University Hospital. I got that? Dr. O'Leary will brief you on the President's operation and on his condition, as well as that of the Secret Service agent. Following that, Sheila Patton, who is Mrs. Reagan's press secretary, will have a word to say about Mrs. Reagan. So now, let me introduce to you Dr. Dennis O'Leary. Doctor.
Thank you. Podium. As Mr. Nofziger has told you, the President is in the recovery room. He is in stable condition, and he is awake. He was in no time in any serious danger. He was alert and awake with stable vital signs up until the time he underwent anesthesia. He was in the operating room for approximately 2 hours. Part of that time was spent ascertaining that he did not have any blood in his abdominal cavity. Indeed, he did not. It was a single bullet wound that entered slightly underneath the left armpit. It traversed about 3 inches of the chest wall and then ricocheted off the 7th rib into the left lower lobe of the lung and moved about 3 inches into the lung substance itself. The operative incision is about 6 inches in width, a relatively simple procedure. The bullet was removed, and then the incision was closed. And as I say, he is stable and in good condition.
What is the prognosis?
The prognosis is excellent.
And you're saying that he will no doubt recover. How long a time, Doctor?
That is always difficult to say. The president, however, is an excellent physical specimen, and we do not anticipate any problems. It is always hard to be precise as to how long he'll be hospitalized, but he is clear of head and should be able to make decisions by tomorrow, certainly.
Did the bullet fragment when it hit the lung? Did the bullet fragment when it hit the lung?
The bullet was distorted, and we believe that it probably was distorted by virtue of impacting against the 7th rib, which redirected its path into the lung tissue.
Any permanent injury?
We do not believe there's any permanent injury. The heart area was explored. The heart was not involved at all. There were no major bleeding points in the lung, and there was no involvement of the aorta, the major vessel running through the chest. The lung has been reinflated. He has a couple of chest tubes in.
Tell us about the Secret Service.
Excuse me?
Can you tell us about the Secret Service agent?
I can't hear you.
Secret Service agent. The Secret Service
Okay,
agent.
Mr. McCarthy had a single bullet wound also, entered the posterior right chest, and passed through the lung tissue, causing virtually no damage at all except for the passage tract, passed through the diaphragm into the dome of the liver, and passed through the liver into the lateral side of the chest where it lodged against the end of the 11th rib. Mr. McCarthy did have blood in his abdominal cavity. The same test that was performed on the president was also performed on him, and it was positive. The abdominal cavity was carefully explored, and the only damage was the bullet through the liver itself, and a drain was placed in this area, and he is doing extremely well. Has been in the intensive care unit now for about 45 minutes.
James Brady. How long would you anticipate?
James Brady.
Okay, Mr. Brady is still in surgery. His condition is critical. We don't have any further information at this time.
Dr. O'Leary, how long would you anticipate that the president would remain hospitalized?
Now, that is difficult to say. Might be as long as 2 weeks, but that is just a guesstimate at this point in time.
President given any blood?
Okay.
Remain here, Doctor.
That's not for me to answer. Question was the amount of blood. The president required a transfusion of approximately 5 units of blood before surgery, but none during the course of surgery. Mr. McCarthy required no transfusion at all.
The D.C. policeman, please.
The D.C. policeman was taken to the Washington Hospital Center. We have no first-hand information on him.
Mr. Brady's injury.
Well, Mr. Brady was shot in the side of the forehead. The bullet went, I'm not certain, sir. The bullet did pass through his brain and came out the other side. He obviously has significant brain injury, and he is in critical condition, but I'm sorry we have no further information at this time.
Dr. O'Leary, who performed the operation on the president?
The operation on the president was performed by Dr. Ben Aaron, who's on our full-time faculty here as a cardiovascular thoracic surgeon. Last name is spelled capital A, small a, R-O-N. First name Benjamin.
Title?
I'm trying to think. I think he's an associate professor of surgery.
Doctor, you would anticipate no further surgery necessary?
The other surgeon was Dr. Joseph Giordano, Giordano, who is head of our trauma team and was in the emergency room almost simultaneously with the arrival of the president.
Why did the operation take so long?
The length of the operation really had a lot to do with the testing to make sure that there was no bleeding into the abdominal cavity. That took about 45 minutes. It's called a peritoneal lavage. P-E-R-I-T-O-N-E-A-L, Lavage, L-A-V-A-G-E. Okay, that test is important, is very simple. A small incision is made beneath the umbilicus, and several liters of fluid are placed into the abdomen, and then the fluid is brought back outside and looked at to determine whether there's any blood in it. That fluid can move anywhere throughout the whole abdominal cavity, and if any organ has been damaged and there's any bleeding, one will find blood in the fluid that comes out. That test was negative in the president, and as I said, positive in Mr. McCarthy.
Doctor, in view of the president's age, is there any danger that the lung might collapse again?
Very doubtful. The president is physiologically very helpful. Caliber of the bullet is going to be very hard to tell in the president because it was a really mangled bullet.
Is there a possibility of any other complications besides the lung problem?
It's really doubtful. Again, I would emphasize that he is physiologically very young. In good shape.
Where the bullet entered, at what angle? From the front, from the rear? Can you give us a...
Well, one would assume that it probably seemed to come from a little bit top down, entering approximately here, traverse down. Traverse down approximately 3 inches, striking the top of the 7th rib laterally, and then going about 3 inches into the tissue of the lung itself.
It deflected downward further from the 7th rib?
No, it's like coming down, hitting the rib, and then deflecting in to take a new path about and then
lose blood.
It was in the parenchyma in the tissue of the lung itself, contained within the lung itself.
But you said the president was conscious through much of the time. What, if anything, did he say?
Well, the surgeons said that his last remark before he underwent anesthesia was he wanted to make sure that all of them were Republicans. They said that today everyone is a Republican.
How narrowly did the president escape mortal injury?
That's a hard question to answer. As I stated, he was never in any serious danger. The bullet was really not very close to any vital structure.
Not so close. How far from the heart?
Probably several inches.
Well, was that because it struck the rib? Was it fortunate?
If it had not struck the rib, it might not have even entered the lung cavity.
You mean it would have passed through his body without doing anything?
It could have passed right through the chest wall if it had not struck the rib.
General anesthetic, you say that clinically speaking, the president is fully able to discharge the duties of his office as of now?
I would say probably not. Now, one has to let the effects of the anesthesia wear off, but I think all of us feel that by tomorrow that he would be fully capable of doing that.
The basic decision he had to make tomorrow, of decision of state of some significance, would he be able to do it?
We believe that he would be able to do it.
Who's operating on Dr. Brady?
Okay, Dr. Arthur Cobrine, K-O-B-R-I-N-E.
Spell that again, I'm sorry.
Cobrine, K-O-B-R-I-N-E, is operating on Mr. Brady. Arthur. He is an associate professor of neurosurgery.
Is it possible to give us any prognosis on James Brady?
It's really not possible right now. As I said, he's in critical condition, but anything I would say would be highly speculative.
For permanent brain damage?
Not at the present time, although in the operating room, remember that you've got respirators and monitors and and what have you, well, almost anyone undergoing brain surgery would be on a respirator.
Dr. O'Leary, aside from the obvious gunshot wound, did the president suffer any other injuries? Were there any abrasions, contusions surrounding being pushed from the limousine or the melee that occurred at that time?
Well, not as we're able to ascertain. It's possible that we missed a small contusion here or there, but he was gone over quite carefully.
President brought to this hospital, and when did the hospital receive word from the ambulance that he would be on the way?
Well, I can't tell you for certain, but I believe we were probably the closest hospital, which would have been the prudent thing to do. I received information at about 20 of 3 that he was in the emergency room, and I think he probably got there around 2:30.
First, Brady or Reagan?
No, okay, I'm not sure who got there precisely first. They all came very fast.
Doctor, this is the... You have to go out and get any of this blood from any other sources if you have enough in the house.
Well, we maintain a stock of blood, but please remember we do not run our own blood bank. The Red Cross has a regional center that is very nearby, and we have all the blood we need within minutes.
You have enough immediately, or was it in the house when they were here?
Yes.
Doctor.
I can't answer that question. I don't know.
Doctor, doesn't require 5 units of blood.
Okay, it appears as if the major reason for bleeding within the chest was as a consequence of the hole made when the bullet actually entered the lung substance itself. That's the only bleeding sites that really could be determined, and although he bled down about 5 units of blood, it was never very brisk. It was kind of a steady bleeding. It was very easy to transfuse him and keep up with his blood loss.
5 units of blood. How much blood is that?
Well, let's see, how can I make that simple? It's about 2.5 quarts. Total of 2.5 quarts.
Had the president...
What? Question about collapse over here.
Is his lung still collapsed?
No, he has a chest tube in. All one has to do is, usually through a chest tube, is to get it in and get the air out of the space between the lung and the chest wall, and the lung expands. He had a chest tube placed in the chest in the emergency room within minutes after he was in the emergency room.
He's again breathing normally.
Yes.
Is Mrs. Reagan suffering any emotional medical trauma right now?
I think we'll let someone else deal with that question.
Does the president not be moved from this hospital for the next few days?
I would say for the next few days it would probably be reasonable not to move him, but I would expect that he will do well, and that'll be a judgment of someone else at that time.
Did he need any more surgery?
We have no reason for believing that significant post-operative problems will develop.
Doctor, are you in a position, Doctor?
Might have to undergo as a result from this operation?
I would really doubt it. He had a simple procedure. There was very little necessity to cut a lot of tissue, and we have every expectation that he'll have a normal post-operative course. I don't know the answer to that question.
Doctor, are you in a position to recreate the first few moments when he came into your emergency room? Did he walk in? What were the first things that were done?
Okay, I was not personally there, but my understanding is that he got out of the car and stood up and walked in on his own. As I say, he was alert and awake all the time. No.
Did he ever enter shock?
Not to the best of our knowledge.
Did he ever collapse or he was carried on a stretcher?
Well, I think, as soon as he appeared, he may not have wanted to be on a stretcher, but that is our usual procedure for someone who's had a gunshot.
How far inside the chest did the bullet go from skin inside?
About 3 inches. Okay, I'll give you maybe 4 inches, giving you an inch for the thickness of the chest wall.
Dr. O'Leary, can you explain why it was that there was no immediate announcement that the president had been shot? Is it possible, critically speaking, that he might not have immediately been aware that he was shot?
I really can't answer that question. I wish I could.
When he came in, did he know that he had been injured?
Yeah, I think he knew that he had been shot.
Visible signs. Were there any visible signs when he entered the hospital?
No, I think, again, I'm giving this to you secondhand. I gather he seemed a little bit lightheaded, but he was cracking jokes and in very good spirits even at that time.
You placed the chest tube. When you placed the chest tube to re-expand his lung, you said immediately in the emergency room. What did that consist of? Was that an incision? Did you have to put it down his throat?
No. Usually a small incision is made between the ribs, and the tube is placed in and then attached to suction.
And that was the first emergency procedure?
I'd say that was the first emergency procedure.
That would be taking the blood off. Would that be taking the blood off that was coming from the wound in the lung?
There's probably 2 basic purposes. One is if there has been any deflation of the lung. The major purpose is to re-expand the lung, remove the air, and the other is to provide drainage for any blood in the lung space.
Will Mr. Brady suffer any permanent brain damage if he survives?
I'd have to say that that probably is likely, but I really can't give you any more information since he is still in surgery.
Doctor, how long elapsed between when the president was brought to the hospital and he went to surgery, and can you count to that time?
I would say he went, from the time he hit the hospital to the time he went into surgery, probably was no more than about 40 minutes. There are a variety of things being done. He had to have blood tests performed to find out how much blood he had lost. We had to check his blood gases to determine how much oxygen was getting into his circulation. I think the thing that probably took most time is getting the x-rays necessary to determine the extent of the injury, since he had to have both a chest x-ray and an abdominal x-ray.
Doctor, not removing the bullet, you said repairing the lung without actually removing the bullet. There was an earlier report that might be the case.
Well, I saw those reports, but at the time those reports were out, the surgeons had not even entered the chest as yet.
Did you always plan to remove the bullet?
I think every effort would be made to remove the bullet, but if it took a lot of additional extensive surgery, that might have caused a different decision.
The timetable a bit. You say arrived at 2:30 and 40 minutes later went into the operating room, but I thought you said the surgery began around 4.
No. He got to the operating room maybe 3:15, 3:20. Okay, he has to get into the operating room on the table, get under anesthesia in order for surgery to start. So surgery started roughly between 3:30 and 3:45, and it lasted until about 5:30.
Operation is being performed on Mr. Brady if indeed the bullet passed through his brain.
Okay, he is, very simply, he's having a craniotomy, which simply means an exploration of the inside of the head. Craniotomy, C-R-A-N-I-O-T-O-M-Y.
I find it extraordinary that a 70-year-old man could be shot in the lung and then walk into the hospital under his own power.
I think it speaks well for the physiologic health of the president. We do have elderly people, much more elderly than the president is, who do undergo chest surgery, but he certainly sailed through it.
Call that medically extraordinary, though.
Maybe not medically extraordinary, but just short of that, okay?
Doctor, you said the bullet was mangled. Is there any possibility that bullet fragments might remain inside the president's body?
That is a finite possibility, but the bullet did, although mangled, seemed to be intact. You're never sure that you have every tiny little fragment out.
Has the president been told of Mr. Brady's condition?
I don't think that he is alert enough really to assimilate that information, and I don't know really what we would tell him at this juncture, since we're not sure yet what the story is.
Doctor, can you talk a little bit about what the body goes through, how much of a shock to the body it is when you go through an operation like the president went through, and do you expect any of that shock, if there is any, to be aggravated by the president's aid?
Well, I'd say anytime anyone undergoes major surgery, a thoracotomy is major surgery. It's not extraordinary surgery, but it's major surgery. That would be a stress for any one of us. It'd be a stress for me. But the critical element is the physiological health of the person and your ability to maintain their vital signs and their blood volume satisfactorily. The president's vital signs were absolutely rock stable through this whole thing.
You see policemen someplace else.
Well, that is a decision really made by the ambulances, but I think that we do have several trauma centers in the District of Columbia, and to the extent that one center does not get many very seriously injured patients, all of our ability to care for the patients is increased. Obviously, in the heat of a situation, people do the best they can. If you track back where that decision was made, it's sometimes hard to find out who really made that decision.
To make the incision, and how large was it?
The incision's about 6 months, or excuse me, 6 inches long, and it extends basically from about here into the posterior part underneath the armpit. Okay, about from here to here. You see it? Here to here. Just underneath the nipple. Again, hard to tell. He's a healthy guy, and I'm sure this is a painful injury and even moderately painful surgery, but he withstood it very, very well.